Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
As a yoga instructor and wellness coach, I spend my days helping others connect with theirs. So when I got pregnant with my first child 8 years ago, I studied everything about birth and prepared myself mentally and physically for the experience. That first birth was intense but quick. Just 49 minutes after my first contraction, which made me throw up violently, my son was born. No pain relief needed. The midwives were amazed, but I wasn't surprised. I'd done my research and knew some births could be that fast. Now I was pregnant with my second child. At 38 weeks, I noticed my waters were slowly leaking, so I went to the hospital to get checked. They admitted me for monitoring, but I wasn't having any contractions yet. I was put in a regular ward under the care of this midwife who had the most condescending attitude I'd ever encountered. I told her my nausea was getting worse and that I thought I needed to move to the delivery suite. Without even looking up from her paperwork, she dismissed me, saying I wasn't in active labor and there was no point in moving me yet. Then it hit me, that same violent nausea I'd experienced with my first birth. When I was throwing up, I could feel the pressure building. I pleaded with her, explaining that my waters were bulging and I needed to get to delivery immediately. She just sighed dramatically and told me that since I had no measurable contractions, I was going to be there for hours. I asked if she could at least break my waters properly because the pressure was intense. Rolling her eyes, she refused, saying it would be completely unnecessary at this stage. The pressure was becoming unbearable. I could feel my body getting ready to push. When I told her I needed to push, she practically shouted at me, ordering me not to push under any circumstances and insisting I wasn't even in proper labor yet. I knew what my body was telling me. I gave a small push, and what happened next was absolutely glorious. My waters didn't just break, they exploded. It was like a water balloon bursting in slow motion. The flood hit everything: the bed, the floor, the drug trolley, and most satisfyingly, the midwife who had been standing right next to me. She was completely drenched from head to toe. Before she could even process what had happened, my daughter came shooting out like she was on a water slide. The midwife started panicking, screaming for someone to hit the emergency button and asking where the gloves and clamps were. I sat up, noticed my daughter's umbilical cord was wrapped once around her neck, and carefully unwrapped it myself. The midwife stood there, dripping wet and mouth agape, as I picked up my perfectly healthy daughter. Looking her straight in the eye, I told her that I had tried to warn her and suggested that maybe next time she should listen to her patients when they say they know their bodies. The head of midwifery happened to be doing rounds and witnessed the whole thing. She pulled the midwife aside afterward, and I could hear her getting a proper lecture about respecting patients' instincts and the importance of listening to experienced mothers. My daughter is perfectly healthy, and I later heard that the midwife had to attend additional training on patient communication and rapid labor management. I had been saving up for months to buy this beautiful emerald green wrap dress for my sister's engagement party next week. After finally getting it yesterday, I decided to wear it today to make sure it fit perfectly and wouldn't need any alterations. I work from home, but I occasionally like to work from this quiet cafe downtown that has the best chai lattes and a really peaceful atmosphere. I was sitting there working on my laptop when this woman walked in wearing the exact same dress. Now, I wouldn't normally care about something like this. It's a popular brand, and these things happen. But the moment she saw me, her face turned red and she walked straight to my table. She immediately started yelling at me, demanding that I take off my dress right now. When I asked her what she meant, she explained that her boyfriend was coming to the cafe in 30 minutes to propose to her, and she couldn't have me, ruining her special moment by wearing the same dress. I tried to be reasonable and told her that while I wouldn't take off my dress, I could move to the other side of the cafe since it was pretty big. She refused to accept this compromise, screaming that I didn't understand and that everything had to be perfect. She insisted that her boyfriend needed to see her as the only one in this dress, claiming it was her day. The other customers started staring at us. I made another attempt at being reasonable, explaining that I had paid good money for this dress and wouldn't take it off, but promised to stay out of her photos. She shrieked that this wasn't good enough. Without warning, she lunged across the table, knocking over my chai latte onto my laptop. She grabbed at my dress, trying to pull it off me. I jumped back, but she kept coming. We ended up in this bizarre tug-of-war with her screaming like a banshee. The cafe manager rushed over and threatened to call the police if she didn't stop immediately. In her frenzy to get to me, Karen tripped over a chair. As she fell, she grabbed her own dress to steady herself, and there was this loud ripping sound. The entire side seam of her dress split open, revealing her underwear. She started crying hysterically, accusing me of assaulting her and ripping her dress. She pulled out her phone and called the police, claiming through her tears that she had been sexually assaulted at the downtown cafe and that I had attacked her and ripped her dress off. The manager had already called the police himself, and 2 officers arrived within minutes. While they were taking statements from everyone, a man walked into the cafe. Karen's face lit up for a second before turning confused. She asked him why he wasn't holding flowers and where the ring was. Her boyfriend looked around at the scene. Karen with her ripped dress, me still trying to dry off my laptop, and the police officers taking statements. He said this would make what he came to say easier. He told her they needed to break up because he knew about all the guys she'd been hooking up with behind his back. He explained that his friend had seen her the previous week at the bar with some guy's tongue down her throat. Karen went into a frenzy, denying everything and blaming me for making her look crazy. She tried to lunge at me again, but this time the police officers caught her. They'd seen enough and told her that she was under arrest for assault and filing a false police report. She kept screaming about how I'd ruined her life. The boyfriend apologized to everyone in the cafe and left. The manager gave me free chai lattes for a month, and thankfully, my laptop survived the spill. During her court appearance for my assault charges, she ended up having to pay a fine and do community service. She also had to cover the cost of my laptop cleaning and my dress dry cleaning. I still wear that dress to the cafe sometimes. The chai lattes taste even better now. After 15 years in the corporate world, I thought I'd seen it all. The endless meetings about meetings, the reply-all email chains that wouldn't die, and enough office politics to fill a soap opera. But nothing prepared me for what happened at Maxwell & Partners marketing agency. I joined the company about 2 years ago as a senior account manager. The pay was decent, my co-workers were competent, and most importantly, the workplace culture was refreshingly laid back. Our department ran like a well-oiled machine, until Karen arrived. Now I should mention that before Karen, our department had a pretty simple system for office supplies. We had our own supply closet, and everyone followed 3 basic rules. Take what you need, don't hoard, and keep it tidy. In my 18 months there, we never once had an issue. Not a single complaint about missing supplies or messy shelves. Enter Karen, our new office manager. Fresh from some corporate efficiency seminar, she strutted in with her fancy blazer and a smartphone permanently attached to her hand. From day one, she made it clear that things were going to change. It started with the morning inspections. Every day at precisely 8:45 a.m., she'd march to the supply closet and scrutinize every shelf like she was conducting a military inspection. One morning, I politely greeted her while trying to get a new notebook. She immediately questioned whether I had completely used every page in my previous notebook. When I admitted I hadn't but explained it was getting close to full, she curtly told me that I didn't need a new one and lectured me about being mindful of unnecessary consumption. Within a week, the entire department received her first mass email. Attention all staff. Effective immediately, all office supplies must be logged in the new sign-out sheet. Please include your name, department, items requested, and detailed justification for each item. Failure to comply will result in disciplinary action. Best regards, Karen. After reading the email, my co-worker from the next cubicle leaned over and incredulously asked if Karen was seriously requiring us to justify using a pen now. I joked that she'd probably want us to return the used ones next. We laughed, but Karen was just getting started. 2 weeks later, she installed a lock on the supply closet. The next morning, we found another email. Attention! Due to ongoing supply management concerns, all supply requests must now be submitted via email for approval. I will personally evaluate each request and distribute supplies accordingly. This policy is non-negotiable. Best regards, Karen. That's when my cubicle neighbor, a notorious office prankster, caught my attention. With a mischievous grin, he asked if I wanted to see something fun. I watched as he composed an absurdly formal email requesting a single paperclip, complete with corporate jargon about document organization purposes and estimated time of procurement. 10 minutes later, Karen Power walked to his desk, paperclip in hand, looking like she'd just swallowed a lemon. The next day, he sent 3 more requests, each for a single paperclip. His little act of rebellion spread like wildfire. Soon, everyone was sending individual requests for the smallest items. I joined in, sending ridiculously formal requests for single post-it notes. Another co-worker wrote elaborate emails justifying the need for a single rubber band, citing file bundle containment as an urgent requirement. The emails kept coming, every single day. By week's end, Karen was practically living in the supply closet, frantically trying to keep up with requests. Our morning team meeting had to be postponed because the presenter was still waiting for approval on a dry erase marker. The quarterly report was delayed because 3 people needed staples. The client presentation postponed because nobody had access to presentation folders. That's when our department head started asking questions. Our productivity numbers had tanked, and clients were getting irritated with delays. During the emergency management meeting, Karen tried desperately to defend her system by touting the cost savings on supplies. The department head immediately countered by questioning how much we were losing in billable hours and client satisfaction. The regional director, who'd flown in specifically for this issue, then stepped in. He revealed that while Karen's system had saved a mere $150 in supply costs compared to last quarter, it had cost the company $47,000 in delayed projects and overtime. When Karen tried to protest about waste, he cut her off by pointing out the absurdity of making a senior account manager wait 2 days for a pen. He then terminated her employment on the spot. Karen sputtered about unfairness, but the regional director simply called for security to escort her out. The next morning, the lock was gone and a new email arrived. Attention staff, the supply closet is now unlocked. Previous policies are rescinded. Please return to the honor system. And thank you for your patience during this transitional period. Best regards, Regional Director. I heard later that Karen tried suing for wrongful termination, claiming we'd conspired against her. The company's lawyers had a field day with that one, presenting hundreds of pages of her own emails as evidence of her mismanagement. She's now consulting on corporate efficiency somewhere else. Poor them. My husband and I have been together for 12 years, and throughout our marriage, he's been fighting a legal battle over his late father's estate. His stepmother has been trying to contest the will for years, claiming she deserves a larger portion than what was allocated to her. After multiple delays and appeals, we finally got a court date to settle this once and for all. Yesterday was supposed to be a day of closure for us. Instead, it turned into one of the most shocking displays of authority abuse I've ever witnessed. The morning started normally enough. We arrived at the courthouse early, dressed in our best formal attire. My husband was nervous but prepared. His attorney had assured us we had a strong case and all the documentation was in order. I was there purely for moral support, sitting in the gallery to observe the proceedings. The first red flag appeared when the judge walked in 20 minutes late. The court officer had already made everyone rise and wait in uncomfortable silence. When His Honor finally arrived, instead of apologizing for his tardiness, he immediately launched into a tirade. The judge started complaining loudly about how he'd been stuck at the courthouse until 9 p.m. the previous night doing paperwork, all because the attorneys were overloading his docket. He wasn't even looking at anyone specific, just ranting into the air. Then he zeroed in on a young attorney in the front row, demanding to know how long they'd been practicing law. When the young attorney nervously replied that they'd been practicing for 3 years, the judge launched into a condescending lecture about how his courtroom worked. He warned everyone that he wouldn't tolerate lengthy arguments or unnecessary motions, insisting things would move quickly and that he wouldn't stand for any funny business or a repeat of the previous night. At first, I thought maybe he was just having a bad day. Maybe he was overworked and stressed. I couldn't have been more wrong. What followed was like watching a horror show where the monster wore a black robe. The judge moved through cases at breakneck speed, but his treatment of people varied drastically. If someone had an attorney, he was merely curt. But for those representing themselves, he turned into a completely different person. He mocked a young man who misunderstood basic legal terminology. When the young man tried to apologize and explain that he'd tried to understand the law, the judge cut him off with a sneering suggestion that he should hire an attorney next time instead of making the judge explain basic legal concepts. But the worst moment, the one that still makes my blood boil, came when they called a woman's case. She had what appeared to be a severe neurological condition. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, and when she tried to speak, her words came out slurred and difficult to understand. Her husband stood beside her, clearly used to acting as her caretaker. The judge demanded she state her name for the record. When the woman struggled to speak, her husband tried to step in and explain about her medical condition. The judge immediately threatened to throw him in jail for contempt if he spoke another word, insisting that the woman had to speak for herself. The poor woman was visibly distressed, which only made her symptoms worse. Tears started rolling down her face as she struggled to form words. The judge showed no compassion, no humanity. He just impatiently told her that they didn't have all day, and either she needed to speak clearly or her case would be dismissed. At that point, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood up in the gallery and called out that this was discriminatory, pointing out her medical condition. The judge's face turned red as he called for the bailiff. But I wasn't done. I shouted out that the Americans with Disabilities Act required reasonable accommodations, and what he was doing was illegal discrimination. That got everyone's attention. Several attorneys in the room turned to look at me, and I saw a few nodding in agreement. The judge, realizing he'd been called out publicly on a serious legal violation, suddenly changed his tone. He reluctantly allowed the woman's husband to assist her, though he still insisted they needed to be quick about it. The case proceeded, but I wasn't done. During the lunch recess, I went straight to the courthouse administrator's office and filed a formal complaint. I also contacted the state's office of the Ombudsman and the Judicial Conduct Committee. To my surprise, several attorneys who had witnessed the morning's events gave me their cards, offering to provide statements about the judge's pattern of behavior. 2 weeks later, I received a letter informing me that the judge was being investigated for multiple violations of judicial conduct. 3 months after that, local news reported that he had been removed from the bench pending a full investigation into discriminatory behavior and abuse of power. My husband's case was reassigned to a different judge who actually listened to the arguments and reviewed the evidence fairly. We won, and his father's wishes were finally honored. But more importantly, a power-tripping judge learned that wearing a robe doesn't put you above the law. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.